Sheila, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us about your work and exactly what a graphologist is?
Yes, I'd love to. A graphologist is someone who analyzes handwriting to understand the personality of the writer.
What sort of things are you able to tell about a person by their handwriting?
Well, a handwriting doesn't tell everything, but it does tell a lot, particularly how the state of your ego, how you think, how you relate to other people, your drives, your fears, and also your controls.
What do you mean by controls?
Well, people are controlled by different means. Self-discipline is the best, because it's a conscious control. It's things you've learned right and wrong. Then there's the control by fears, things that have happened to you in the past, and you say, I'm never going to let that happen again. And then you have fears by defenses, which have to do with what you've learned as a child and those old messages that play in your head, like your parents looking over your shoulder. So if that's very strong in you, your handwriting would look a particular way, and if it's by inhibitions, it's another way. If it's by self-discipline, it's yet another way.
How do those things come out and express themselves in the handwriting?
They, in particular, the fears and controls. Well, if the handwriting is controlled by your defenses, if the person's defenses are very strong, the writing is likely to look very much like the school type that they learned. They'll stick very much to the model. They need rules and regulations. If it's by fears, then there will be things like rigidity. It'll be not flexible. There might be a lot of little hooks all over it. The loops will be squeezed together. And then if it's conscious control, self-discipline, it'll have good spacing, good rhythm. Space between the words and the lines will be regular. And it will look more harmonious.
Do different personality types write in different ways? For instance, a person who's very angry, will they write a certain way? A person who's very happy, sad, and so on down the line?
Yes, absolutely, because handwriting is like a mirror image of who you are inside. You may act differently on the outside, but who you are is reflected in your handwriting. So an angry person, for instance, might have, let me first say that nothing means anything by itself, no one thing. It's how everything looks in the whole picture. But an angry person is probably going to have a lot of angles in their writing, sharp points, heavy pressure, and possibly a strong right slant.
What about a happy person?
Then you're going to have more rounded writing, maybe an uphill slant and right slanted loops.
A sad person?
Smaller, less pressure, downhill. Those are just some of the features.
How did you first get involved in this line of work? How are you graphologist accredited?
Okay, well, I'll start with the last question first. There is no official governmental controls on handwriting analysis. Anybody can pick up a book and call themselves a graphologist, unfortunately. There are, however, organizations, nonprofit organizations, who certify, or schools, proprietary schools that certify their members. So it's really an unofficial thing. But there are some good certification tests through these various organizations. As to how I got started in it, and by the way, I am certified by American Handwriting Analysis Foundation and Society of Handwriting Analysts in Washington, D.C., and I'm qualified in the court system as a handwriting expert. When I was about 17, my boyfriend at the time, who became my husband, his mother read a book on graphology, and she analyzed my handwriting. And I was so impressed that I started reading about it, and it became sort of an entree for me because I was very shy. And now when I would go to parties, everybody would want their handwriting analyzed, so I didn't have to really be too sociable. I could just have them come to me. So anyway, I studied on my own for about 10 years, and then I discovered that there were correspondence schools and meetings, and so then I did do some official study.
There are some people viewing who may think this is like palm reading or fortune telling, but this is more scientific, isn't it?
It is. It's not a predictive tool in that sense. The handwriting tells a lot about potentials, but it can't say what is going to happen in the future. It is an art and a science, and it's been validated mostly in European universities the last 40, 50 years, and there's a lot of studies going on in this country at the moment. I have a list of about 4 pages of published studies over the past 25 years.
What are some examples of some of the people who come to you looking for handwriting analysis?
Most of my clients are companies who are hiring people, and they want to make sure that they've got the right person for the job, because you can have somebody who has really got, plenty of skills for what they're going to do, but their personality may not match with in the corporate structure. They may not, the corporate culture may be different than and they wouldn't be comfortable. So it's real important to them, and to how to manage their employees too. Also, I get people who want compatibility reports, either business partners or marriage partners or roommates.
A boyfriend, a girlfriend.
Boyfriend, girlfriend, parents and children, teachers and students. There's also a branch of what I do called graphotherapy, where you can change certain handwriting characteristics to change personality traits that you don't like. And I do vocational reports and personal reports for individuals. And then there's also the question document side, where I do forgery identification through handwriting.
So for instance, a will or some other legal document, somebody may have tried to forge it, and they will call on you to analyze that.
Yes.
Can you tell us about your work in the court system?
It's not a very large part of what I do. My testimony is accepted as an expert, but I prefer the personality assessment side of it, so I don't really advertise. When it comes to me, I do it. But I've had some interesting cases, like the Kurt Cobain suicide note, which I was asked to identify and make sure that it was really his. I've been asked to do Elvis Presley. There was somebody who wrote a letter that was very similar to his handwriting, and they thought maybe it was his and that he was still alive. And others, like a $7 million estate where the will was being questioned. And in that one, I had not seen originals. I only got copies. And because it was such a large amount, the judge stopped the proceedings, took a recess, and sent me to the attorney's office where the original was kept. And there we found it very obvious that it had been whited out. The signature was whited out and another one written on top.
What about for police? Do police call upon you?
Not very often, although I did recently do a case for the Australian police, which wasn't a document case. It was where they have a serial killer in jail, and somebody was writing him notes, and some girls were missing, and so they wanted a profile on this note writer to see if he might be a suspect.
You mentioned that you can change your handwriting and then your personality will follow your handwriting?
Yeah, if you have that potential in you. Of course, it's not going to make you do something that you don't have. It's like with hypnosis. They can't make you do something that you're not willing to do. But if you want to change a particular trait, then handwriting exercises. It's not so much changing individual features of your handwriting, but there are exercises called form drawings. And if you do those and you write affirmations, you will see a change. I've done it on myself.
Now, is it something as simple as a person who is, let's say, messy around his house, beginning to write neat? And does he become a neat person then?
Well, he would pay more attention to details. But there would be certain things that I would have him do, these exercises. And yes, he would begin to work. It comes from the inside out. It's like a subliminal message. And you begin to see these exercises incorporated automatically into the handwriting. There are some things that we would change, like you might have somebody cross their T's a little differently, but those are rather superficial things.
Are you able to analyze Japanese characters like kanji, hiragana, katakana, like you analyze English?
It's not something, I have not studied Japanese writing, but I have an associate who is Japanese, and I would call on her to do that. She tells me that It would be difficult to do an analysis in Japanese writing because some of the principles of the writing are not the same. For instance, in the English we have a certain kind of slant, and we have what we call zones in the writing that do not exist in the Japanese writing.
Now, is that something that you would be able to study, and if you decided to, you could learn that as well?
Well, I would imagine I could, because I do analyses on Arabic and Hebrew and Cyrillic and other languages. So I'm sure it could be learned. The principles are the same.
You also analyze famous people, movie stars and so forth. Can you tell us about some of them? I know you had done some analysis on Princess Diana.
Right.
What can we learn about her from her writing?
Sure. Writing. Princess Diana's writing is very rounded, like a young girl. We usually see that kind of writing in teenagers. And the roundedness shows her need for nurturing and security and for approval. She also has a very large D on her name, and it's underscored. So that's like putting herself forward and saying, you know, the emphasis is on me. Here I am. Look at me.
And then there was Prince Charles.
Yes, Prince Charles is over here. His writing shows him to be more of a poet than a prince. He's a sensitive guy. He has very simplified writing. He also has, I don't know if you can see the letter D going back to the left. It's called a lyrical D. And we see that in the handwritings of poets and those who love literature.
In your personal life, do you analyze people you meet or business contacts or your own family? Or?
Well, I certainly analyzed my husband's writing before we ever went out, and that helped me. You know, everybody has things that they need to make adjustments on to have a successful relationship, and so having the handwriting has certainly been a big help to me. I also look at my children's handwriting from time to time, and I think that's been a help too.
Does handwriting change? For instance, if one of your kids was going through a difficult period in his life, would it change and would it revert back?
Yes. There are temporary changes. Usually with moods, we see a change in size and slant. I know one of my children was going through a very difficult period a few years ago, and the handwriting got so small it practically disappeared off the page. And he was feeling very depressed. But then later it got back to its normal size after the situation was over.
We had a presidential candidate in the U.S. several years ago, Gary Hart, who at one point in his life completely changed his autograph.
Yes.
Does that indicate when somebody changes their autograph very obviously?
They want to change their public image. I have a couple of signatures. The first one of the same person. The first one is completely illegible, and it has a big circle around it, which shows self-protectiveness. The illegibility is a sign that he has something to hide. And then with the circle around it, really hiding, it's like doing this, protective. This, after you can see the change in the second signature. It's completely clear, and it's Jimmy Swaggart, who was found, as a minister on TV, an evangelist, who was found with a prostitute. So he had something to hide, but after it all came out, he didn't have to hide anymore. So his signature opened up.
You've also analyzed a number of suicide notes. What do those typically look like? What are characteristics of those?
I don't know that there is a typical suicide note. A lot of them you would never know. I mean, somebody who's depressed is generally going to write with a downhill slant, and especially words at the end of a line might fall down, they're leaning down, or running off the edge of a page. But many times a suicide will feel sort of happy and relaxed after they've made the decision. And so we might see the opposite. The handwriting may be going uphill, and you don't see any signs of depression. I'm currently, I'm about to launch into a study with an Israeli doctor who is a colleague of mine on depression. We're going to be comparing handwritings of normal people and depressed people to one of the established psychological tests.
What sorts of projects are you involved in now?
One of my main focus is to raise the professionalism of graphologists in the United States. And last year I came up with a code of ethics, a global, it's not attached to any organization, but for people to commit to a particular standard. I give an annual conference for handwriting professionals, and I have a newsletter for this group. It's called the Vanguard. And it's not an organization, but it's a network of handwriting professionals in this country and in Canada and any other country who would like to subscribe. I have subscribers in England. I'm also, the big project now is a CD-ROM that is going on the market. And there are two products, one for home use, it's called the Sheila Lowe's Personal Handwriting Analyzer, and the other one is for business called Sheila Lowe's Professional Handwriting Analyzer. And this CD has a list of handwriting characteristics, like, for instance, size, slant, margins. And for each one of these characteristics, there are several screens giving different examples. And what you would do is take the handwriting that you're looking at and compare it to the screens and click on the one that's most like the writing. And then when you've gone through the whole list, or as many as you want to do, click on Finish, and you get a report and a graph.
What are your goals for the future? Where would you like to see the whole graphology go in terms of the way it's viewed?
Well, I would like it to be seen as attached to and related to psychology, with the same kind of licensing requirements and schooling. There really are no schools for credit that are set up, and so it's mostly taught by correspondence or by private teachers like myself. So it would be my goal to see it accepted as one of the professions.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.